Thank you for hopping on the old Skype machine to chat about your latest endeavors, including your film Sabbatical, which is really fucking good. I was just thinking about how much I love Robert Longstreet in this film because he's so just the anxiety that he creates for other people in this film, just by virtue of like being a man, or just like for me, it's like I just noticed the deep breaths when he leaves the room, from the other characters, and it just feels like here's a man who's like who's trying to maintain control or maintain his like position as like the man of the family or something,
Mm-hmm.
But how did you find him, and why did you choose him, and what was it that made you sort of realize that he was the one?
Well, we were originally sort of trying to cast the film locally, which is what we did on my first film, Frames. And once my first film got on No Budge, we kind of like got to know more people and had a bit of momentum. And so Tony, my producer and who my editor, was like, "We need to go for people we want." And so I was like, "Yeah, you're right. We should." And I was like, "Well, Kentucker, who runs No Budge, liked my last movie. I wonder if he would be in this." And Kentucker was like, "Yeah, definitely." And then we were like, "Well, who could be the lead?" And Tony kind of said Robert Longstreet, and I was like, "Whoa," because it's kind of like a pretty dramatic shift from the kind of stuff Robert typically does, which is really sort of like emphatic and wild, and he's kind of like known for being this dude who gives these really intense, loud performances. But I mean, I'd seen him in a lot of films, and I was kind of like, yeah, I think he could act. I think he could pull it off, because there are a lot of things about Robert, like his eyes and his voice are both like really wonderful expressive tools, and they don't have to do much to communicate a lot, and that was pretty crucial for the role. And so I got Robert's email from a friend and sent him the script, and he immediately said yes. And that's how we started doing that. And then basically from there, Robert kind of helped us cast the rest of the film, because he would be like, "Who do you guys have for this person?" And we were like, "I don't know yet." And he was like, "Well, here's like 6 people. Pick whoever you want."
Oh wow!
So we basically did that, and I would say, "I like this person, I like this person," and he would send them to script, and all of our first choices said yes.
Wow. So is that how you went about getting Thomas J. Ryan?
Yeah, Robert mentioned him, and I was like, "Holy shit," because I'm a huge Hal Hartley fan, like big time major Hal Hartley fan, and so it was really surreal to like start emailing with Tom, and I was kind of like telling him about some of my visual reference points for the film, including the paintings of this Danish guy named Wilhelm Hammershøi, and Tom Ryan was like, "Oh no way, that's my favorite painter." And I was like, "I can't believe this is happening." It was like running into like a really beautiful person and then being like, "Oh, I love you."
How did you get them all on board with your like stilted acting style? Because I feel like it's something that's common, at least between your first film Frames and this film, is that sort of sense of really really slow, long pauses between sentences. Like nothing's overlapping ever.
Yeah.
And how do you, first of all, like how do you arrive at that, and how do you get the actors on board with that timing?
Well, first of all, I think that acting is like the final frontier for experimentation in cinema. And I think for a lot of reasons it doesn't get the kind of attention it deserves, because people just assume that like acting should be realistic, and there are a lot of directors I think who are more comfortable just like letting actors do what they want, and actors are kind of like film actors are trained to be very realistic.
Right.
And so it's like this feedback loop that means that like people don't push stuff or take chances with acting as much as they should, I think. And so for me, like, experimenting with the form and style and rhythm of performance is really, like, paramount. And I think seeing my first film gave some of the actors here, like, a taste of kind of what I was going for. And the way I write the scripts is, like, my scripts are very, very detailed. And, like, instead of numbering scenes, I number the shots. So, like, all the shots are written into the script. And, like, moment by moment, things are kind of structured. I mean, once we get on set, things, like, loosen up and things will change. But going in, there's, like, a pretty strict outline of how things are going to go. And then once we got on set, we always, like, every take that's in the film is almost always the last take or the next to last take. And we would probably shoot, like, 6 to 8 takes of every shot. I mean, they're all really long takes, so there are a lot of things that could go wrong. But one of the, like, byproducts of that, and one of the things that I used while directing, was to, like, basically the first and second takes were, I would talk to the actors a little bit, and then I would kind of see what they did. And if they did something that I liked, I would incorporate that. But usually the first and second takes were, like, getting rid of energy, if that makes sense. Because, like, a lot of performers are used to coming at scenes with a lot of energy and a lot of intensity, and this film is kind of asking them to do the opposite. And so it's like an exorcism of energy almost in the first couple of takes, and then sometimes they would do stuff that was cool that I would then, like, fold in to the, like, dough of the scene, so to speak. And it would just be like a process of refinement on the takes, of a lot of saying, like, slower, quieter, like, don't breathe there. So I get, like, kind of picky about that stuff, but the great thing is all the actors that we had on board were, like, incredibly talented. Like, this was the moment where I was like, holy shit, actors. Like, working with real actors is great because they can control everything. And, like, as long as you know what you want and can communicate it to them, they can do it. And that was really a remarkable thing to experience firsthand.
Locations. Tell me about locations. Obviously, this is a very low budget film. How are you able to go about getting your locations? I noticed an airport in there. Is that an actual airport? How do you use cameras, camera angles, focus, things like that to kind of get the most out of your locations?
That is a real airport. We shot in all... Nothing is cheated, except one thing is kind of cheated. But a lot of the locations... So, like, the airport, the hardware store, that, like, hospital thing, all of those were places where we, like, emailed people and just asked if we could shoot there. And they were like, yeah, as long as you have insurance, which, like, we did. But, like, nobody asked for money. And we, like, offered to pay the hardware store guy, and he was like, no, I couldn't possibly take any of your money. And this is, like, a very, like, what happens when you don't shoot in New York and LA and Austin kind of thing. Right. Where, like, people are just, like, happy to have, like, filmmakers around, and it's exciting, and they just want to help you. And then other stuff was two of the house locations, not the main house locations, but two of the other ones were places donated by people I knew who let us shoot at their houses. And then the main house was, like... took so long to find because it was our main location and it was also our, like, home base for all of our equipment and kind of, like, where we would serve lunch because everything was kind of in a certain radius of that house. And I looked forever and contacted, like, so many realtors to just, like, find something, like, an empty house that we could rent for, like, 2 months. And then I finally found one, and it was so great. And the woman who was the realtor for it actually lived next door to it. And she was, like, so nice and would, like, take out the garbage for us. And there's like a scene where they mow the lawn, and so we like mowed that part of the lawn and then had to do other stuff. And she was like, "Do you want me to mow the rest of the lawn?" And I was like, okay." But she was super nice. That house was like so perfect. When I went in it, I was so happy because everything was the right color, and there's like so much light. And I would just like go to that house during the daytime and just like sit in it and take light meter readings at different times of the day and check out the different windows and think about how light was coming in and where to put stuff. And so because it was a totally empty house, after I had kind of like looked at where the light was coming and which walls I liked and all that kind of stuff, we could then decorate the house to suit the way we wanted to shoot it completely. And so that was really awesome.
I also just really love how you frame interiors. And this being pretty like sparsely populated frames in terms of like the elements that are inside of them. Obviously, you're inspired by the painter, but what else do you look for when you're framing interiors? The lines, the areas of shadow, the contrast areas, and how do you block actors to fit within your framing aesthetic?
I usually have a pretty good idea of I storyboard everything, and usually I'll do like multiple drafts of the storyboards, like before I go see the locations, and then after I'll make new ones. So I have a sense of what the frames are going to be, and the camera doesn't move very often. So I can spend a lot of time getting a framing exactly the way I want. And regarding things in the frame, like having sparse frames, it's kind of like tied to my frustration with like realism generally. Like in acting, I have like I said earlier, I have issues with the sort of like default is trying to like approximate reality. And with the way like the sets and the production design work, I don't like things that are in there just because it's realistic. Like I want everything to have some kind of like visual function, or to, even if it's not like adding to the overall aesthetics of a shot, to at least have nothing in it that subtracts.
Right. You don't
So
want
like,
somebody looking at some red ball in the corner of the room when they're supposed to be looking at something else.
and colors are just so emotional to me, and composition is really emotional to me. Like they have impact, like they can change my mood if I see a certain composition and a certain set of colors. And so controlling the color palette is something that's really important. But in terms of like what I look at when I'm thinking about framing, a lot of times I'm trying to find a way, well, especially on this film, trying to find a way to see the space from a position you might not normally see it. Like, I thought about that a lot. Like, especially, like, I like the idea of not a movie not being all faces all the time. So I like the way that that kind of framing can make like people's elbows and feet and shoulders like expressive. And I think that was something that was really interesting for me to do with the actors as well. Like I kind of had this rule that I wanted to save straight on or like clear views of people's faces as if they were close-ups, so that when you saw a face, it would have power.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed you didn't even see Rhoda Griffith's character's face until like 30 minutes in. Like you only see her from behind or from the side or something. And then when you finally see her in that shot of her face, that extremely long set piece, it is really powerful because you're just finally face to face with her, and you're looking at her face and seeing all the nuances of it that you were maybe had imagined from earlier because you didn't get to see it. So really playing with off screen stuff too, and like, all we want to see, Brandon, all we want to see as an audience is we want to see the sandbag go into the hole. We want to see the sandbag go into the hole. Why do you not just give this to us? Why? What I'm interested in is the juxtaposition of that shot and the shot that comes after it in the kitchen. What was your design for those two shots and the connection between them?
The two shots that have camera movement.
The only two shots in the film that have camera movement. Yes.
I get this. People ask me this question, and in some ways, I don't know. They were just like the two moments where I felt like they were the only two moments in the whole movie that I felt like needed camera movement, and so that's why they're there. So, I mean, there's not like some crazy thematic connection or something. They're just like the way the space was working and the way the scene dynamics worked. Like I felt like I needed camera movement, and they have like the exact same kind of camera movement. They're like lateral tracks. Yeah.
My interpretation is that in both scenes you're seeing something not go into a hole.
That's true.
When potentially they should be.
Yeah, that is very true.
Denial of the hole, really. It's the denial of penetration of any kind.
Definitely some denial going on. But, I mean, yeah. Well, there are also both scenes where there's a lot of stuff happening that you can hear off screen or that you can imagine off screen that you can't really see. I mean, I guess that's kind of true of the whole film. But in those scenes in particular, it's like more active.
It's kind of shocking, right? It's like, whoa, we're moving now. It's like, okay, you just unearthed the entire visual philosophy. And then when I saw both of those shots had camera movement, I started thinking about the connection between them. I started liking it more, you know. And it's good. I mean, even if you don't really explicitly know, I mean, the mystery of it is interesting. Even like the choice of the mystery of the choice.
I mean, it's like they just both felt really right to me, and even thinking like these are the only two shots that have it, that still feels very right to me. But I mean, it's like a mystery to me. But I mean, there's something there. I just haven't figured it out yet.
Right on. I did really notice that overhead shot too of Robert. I tend to really like those kind of shots in my own work. Like, I tend to go to them a lot, or at least I feel like if I think about it, I've done one of those kind of shots in like everything I've made, where you're just standing. It feels like you're just right above an actor.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like disorienting. I mean, I think it's like something I'm always thinking about when I'm making the film is not just like making the choice that serves the narrative, because when everyone makes choices that just like clarify the narrative or whatever, everyone just makes the same choices all the time. But to like make choices that like renew and stimulate your like audiovisual sensitivity, or like that make you look at something or listen to something that you might not pay attention to or you might not see that often in movies. And so when I can get angles like that, it really excites me, especially when they feel correct. Right. There's actually like, I remember, so I'd been wanting to, I actually just saw Godard's Hail Mary recently, and I'd been wanting to watch it for a long time because someone one time wrote about my work and said that my compositional instincts reminded them of like later Godard stuff, and I hadn't really seen that much of it, but I had seen some stills from this movie and I was like, I gotta see it. So I watched Hail Mary like a few months ago, and I was just like, holy shit, this is like this movie, the compositions are exactly what I would do. Like so much of it, like I was like, holy shit, like it was totally shocking to me, because I could recognize so many of the choices in a certain way. And I think that Godard is making decisions for similar reasons in that like mid-late 80s stuff that he's doing, where he's trying to like find ways to renew or like estrange us from our normal expectations about what kind of stuff is going to be in a shot, or like what will dictate the margins of the frames, or if that makes sense.
how much additional lighting did you do to the space? I mean, obviously it has these big windows and it's sort of well lit, but what kind of additional stuff?
For the whole movie, we probably used like non-existent like a film light. We probably used a film light in like five shots, and it was just a China ball. So we got a China ball. We had all the stuff at our disposal, but that's just not my style. I like natural lighting. I like knowing where the light's coming from and working with it. And I don't think the visuals of the movie, there was never a moment where we compromised because we weren't using lights.
Right.
So we kind of just like used lights on night interiors when we needed them. And that's pretty much it. But we use lots of negative fill because, negative fill, a little bit of bounce, but a lot of like just controlling natural light that was coming in through the windows.
Things do you do to stay on top of that as the light's moving? I mean, like, obviously you're doing long takes, so you can actually visibly probably see the light changing during the course of a take. How do you,
If you fast forward through the movie, you'll see many scenes where the light is subtly changing. It's like almost imperceptible. And sometimes when it would change and it would be so perfect, like there's a scene when Robert's character is talking to Kentucker's character, and Kentucker's character leaves the room, and Robert's sitting on a bed. And right after Kentucker left the room, Robert like dipped his head a little bit, and then the lights just like it looks like we have something on a dimmer and we're dimming it down, but it's just happened and it was amazing. But so part of the thing is because we aren't cutting a lot within scenes, the light changing is not really a big deal. So sometimes we would have to wait for clouds, but not that much.
Nice. So you weren't like scrambling to keep the light in a place or keep the negative fill in a particular zone.
We would. One thing we did set up a lot was a big 8x8 butterfly diffuser. So like just a big diffusion tarp.
How many stops, bro?
I don't even know. But we basically just put that in front of the sun because I hate highlights. I hate sun highlights especially. So pretty much anytime we were outside, we were killing highlights with lots of diffusion as much as possible.
And did you shoot on the Blackmagic camera?
C300.
C300. Okay. Right on. Yeah, it looks almost like, because you brought the shadows up. It looks like you brought the shadows out.
So we shot it in like the log C that the C300 has, but it was still too saturated and contrasty. And so I like the look of flashed film, like the way like 70s flashed film looks. This whole like thing with digital where it's like you want to have like technically pure blacks and contrast, like I hate it. I just think it's ugly. It's so ugly and it's so it's like, and it's so depressing because I watch like so many amazing art films. Like, God, I was watching like Norte, the Lav Diaz film, and I was looking at it, and the color correction was just like so cookie cutter. Like it just looked like something where someone's crushed the blacks and upped the contrast, and just feels like a non-decision to me at this point. But I like impure blacks, and I like milkiness in the image, and I think that, like, it's also one way to eliminate sharpness, and I don't like when images are too sharp, and it's just because of saturation and contrast, and when you take those down, it softens it so that it looks the way I like films to look.
Aesthetically, it feels very rigorous, very formalist, very controlled. The whole film feels very controlled in a way, which is nice because you feel like you're putting yourself in the hands of a filmmaker who knows what he's doing, or at least has control over it. It's like sometimes you jump into a movie and you don't know. You can tell quickly that, like, okay, this filmmaker has control over this part of the movie making, but they don't care or don't have control over this part, and you can kind of recognize that. I felt like when watching this film that you have control over everything, and that's a comforting feeling as an audience member because you want to feel confident. It's just a confidence thing in a way. It's like if you can feel that the filmmaker was confident in his decisions, then you feel more confident about absorbing them or something.
Yeah, I mean, I know how I want things to look and how I want them to sound, and so I'm very particular about that stuff throughout the process. And I think partially part of that is that because I teach production classes, I've had to get pretty proficient at kind of all levels of what's going on, so I know what can and can't be done, and I know when people are just doing stuff because they think it's what they're supposed to do. And so I'm it is like a confidence thing, but part of it is just like a confidence to tell someone, no, do this, trust me, that kind of thing.
How do you direct your sound man, and what kind of things do you do to make sure you're getting really good sound in an independent film environment?
Yeah, well, part of what we did for this is, our recordist is awesome. He's also worked on This Is Martin Bonner, which played at Sundance, and Funny Bunny, which is playing at South by Southwest soon. And we had conversations about what we were going to do beforehand, but basically every scene is every actor has a lav and everyone is boomed at the same time. And that's really important to me because I really like, so like the same, there's like a way where you can approach sound naturalistically, where you kind of have like the audio perspective of the camera, and I don't really like that as much. Like, I like this sound that feels very internal, and so that like chesty kind of quality of lavs I really, really enjoy, and I like things that sound really close mic'd. It's just like works with my style in a certain way. And so he like understood exactly what I was trying to do there. And then in the sound design, the first like few passes, or the first pass, our sound designer is this really amazing guy named Matt Baker. He's so talented. And he was kind of like trying to get more of a sense of the space by like adding reverb to some of the audio. And I was just like, no, dude, we're not going to do, I was just like, take it all out. And I know it was like a pretty radical thing to say because like in a lot of ways he was very right. But once he kind of understood what I meant, he was like, boom, like amazing about it. And I like listened to the sound so many times, and I give like painstakingly, annoyingly precise notes. So yeah, we work on sound really, really hard. And I work, like, sound for me begins at the script. Like, there's a lot of sounds in my scripts because I'm always trying to think of how to make the image track and the soundtrack not redundant.
Right.
So I want, if I can keep something off screen, I will keep it off screen. And if sound can do all the work, then I will let sound do all the work. And what that does a lot is like frees me up to put things on the image track that you might not think of. Like a good example is whenever there are phone calls in the movie. Like in the phone calls, you can't ever see Robert's face while he's on the phone. Like one of them is kind of from behind him, and one of them is like above him, almost on top of his head. And then one of them is like his feet on the bed. And in both of those cases, I was like, everything I need to communicate about this phone call, he's going to do with his voice.
Right.
And so what can I do with the frame, like visually, to give some kind of like counterpoint or some kind of like interesting other element of performance that might tell us more about what he's doing other than just like seeing a guy's face while he talks on the phone. And so I'm always thinking about that stuff, and a lot of times when I'm stuck on a scene, just going through and being like, what can I do with sound here? And I'll just like reorient things because doing things just with sound liberates me, and it like totally unlocks me whenever I'm writing. Dude, amazing trivia about our audio. The boom microphone that we used was the exact boom microphone used on Silence of the Lambs.
Wow. The exact same capsule.
Yeah, it was like a 25-year-old Sennheiser 416.
I like films that kind of like carve out a space of their own and like allow you to think for a little while. And like as like almost like a meditation. I mean, like movies at this point are like my church, you know. So so movies like yours are like some kind of meditation or
I
something.
know exactly what you mean. I mean, the movies that I'm most attracted to are movies that are like mood changers. Like movies where you get into the rhythm and the feel of a certain cinematic world, and then it like puts you in a different emotional state. Like that is my favorite thing about films. And that's the kind of thing that I try to communicate. I mean, it's just like what my instinct is creatively, is to make those things, to make these like spaces that like Sabbatical is as much about like it's experiencing a concept of time as it is about experiencing a narrative, or like it's as much about looking at a certain actor's face or their shoulders as it is about learning about a character. And yeah, that stuff's really important to me, and it makes it less accessible for audiences, especially if they have certain preconceptions about what a movie should be doing. So I'm always struggling with like how to orient the viewer before they like step into the movie, to like give them enough of an expectation to where they're not like frustrated that the movie isn't doing a certain thing, but not like spoil the experience of discovery or something.
Yeah, how do you manage that? Like, fuck. That's the thing, man. That's the thing, is how do you manage that? I mean, do you have a trailer for this film?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't even know if I've seen it because I don't watch trailers. But
Yeah.
it's like, you know, I mean, I watch trailers sometimes after I've seen the movie.
Yeah.
But it's like one of those things where, like, yeah, how do you don't have, it feels like you don't have control over those expectations in a lot of ways. But are there things that you do to, like you said, you try to manage the expectation, or what things do you do to preserve that?
I mean, part of it is like including, like mentioning the style in synopses. I think is like at least some kind of like passing mention, and if you can talk about certain directors or films that people might have some kind of pre-existing like apparatus for, like, oh, this is this kind of movie, and that can like put them in the right mindset. The trailer, I think, is good at setting up what we want to do, and it kind of like ends with a joke, which is something that I think is good. Like, the one thing I always do is, like, even people who get into the movie and like it, a lot of times the humor doesn't come out as much as I want it to. So, like, I always tell people, like, it's okay if you think something is funny to laugh, because there are many takes that I would laugh at really hard. Like, there's this scene where Kentucker, like, aggressively drinks this cup of water, this glass of water, and it was, like, the funniest thing to me in the world. And I was just like, this is gold. And there are, like, expressions Robert has that are really, like, hilarious to me, even though he's super depressed.
To me, the funniest moment was the sort of, I don't know if this, I assume it was intentional, but the sort of the you're playing with the expectation of the eye lines with the Thomas J. Ryan and Robert Longstreet, where it feels like they're looking at each other across from each other, and he's drinking the beer and it's kind of getting dark, and then you cut and it's like they were sitting next to each other, not looking at each other at all. And there's that long like space of emptiness. Like, that's the moment where I feel like I laughed the most.
Yeah, I love those kinds of jokes. I mean, yeah, that's like funny to me. That is funny, and it's the stuff that I think is funny in Godard films, and that I think is funny in films by people like Aki Kaurismäki and people like that, who are like kind of like formalist comedians in a certain way. And there's like, I mean, it's obviously not the dominant thing that I'm doing in Sabbatical, but it's like an undercurrent that I think is there. yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out how to prepare people for it. Um, I mean, it's also just like the thing that's not really for everybody.
Right.
But I think that there are more people who would like it than a lot of people think.
Right.
Like every time we screened it publicly, like a lot of people will come up to me and say like, I really like emotionally identified with like the tone of this film. Like my friend Frank Mosley, who's in the movie, his parents came to see it when we played it in Dallas, and his dad was like, you captured exactly what it feels like to take care of a parent who's in this situation and to like have relatives who are kind of like worthless and assholes, and like the feeling of just like how painful it is that someone isn't dead, but that there's this like dwindling like closeness to death that you just have to endure. And so, and like those, I mean, those folks are like intelligent moviegoers, but they're not like into hardcore minimalist art cinema, but they like got what was going on in the movie, and like it touched them, and that's like the ultimately what I hope it would do for anybody. So I think there's like a possibility that people who aren't necessarily like huge Robert Bresson fans would still like this movie. Yeah.
Totally. I think so too, man. And you know, I also like the length of it. You know, it's one of those things where you make a slow film that, you know, might not. Yeah, exactly. People who aren't into Bresson and aren't jizzing their pants over Pickpocket every Sunday night.
Yeah, I do.
I do too. Like the length of it makes it really accessible, and it's a really good thing to do. Like, I mean, it's just hard to. Sometimes it's hard to endure a movie.
I mean, speaking of Bresson has like 2 movies that are over 90 minutes long. Like his movies are short, and because they should be. And I think there's like people like Tarkovsky and like Theo Angelopoulos and people like that who make like very slow films that are also really long. I think that just got like taken up as a model for people, but I think it's actually like really, really hard to make that work, like really hard.
It's a really solid film by what I think is a very exciting filmmaker. Really stoked to make contact with you and chat about movies and all this stuff. I'm definitely. It's like after seeing. You've got 2 films in the canon basically that are just really, really solid, really, really good. So I'm basically on board. You know what I mean? It's like this train is leaving the station. I'm on board, you know? So whatever you make next, I'm going to be an audience member. I'm going to be, you know, my eyes are going to be darting around the frame, searching for meaning. And I hope that your next projects come together quickly, swiftly, and without mercy. So good luck with all that stuff. And we will try to push this as hard as we can on our little website thing.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. Well, I think we can cut on that pretty much.